Hi, Scott Bruder here. I had a video many years ago, and I don't know where it went. I didn't see it published. I didn't know anywhere that it was, but it was in a response to a short that I had made. And it was, can you tell the difference between these two cartridges? And sometimes how being legitimate isn't in your best interest. Okay, well, let's talk about this. On the right hand side, I have a genuine Tetris game from Canada. That's where the Can 1 comes from. I'm Canadian. And on the left hand side, I have this aftermarket cheap Tetris game that came from China. And, we take a look at the bodies, and the Canadian plastic one is really well built. The cheap Chinese one is kind of warped and lightly made, but it's still Tetris, and if you want to play Tetris, great. Now let's take a look at what's going on the inside of the legitimate one. Right, uses a Gamebit screw. The illegitimate one has a really cheap tri-wing screw. So let's take out the Gamebit screw using a Gamebit screwdriver. Set it aside. And we're going to slide the front down and pull it off. And take a look inside. It is a DMG TRA-1 board with a blob. A lot of the legitimate ones will have a IC or a blob. The blobs, I think, were in the later models, or ones that were kind of sourced from different manufacturers. Now, let's take a look at what's inside the illegitimate one on the left-hand side. And this one here is probably only, 4 or 5 years old, whereas this one here literally is from 1989 or maybe 1990. So, same thing. We're going to slide down the cover of where it says Game. And inside, we see a new board that says SD007 underscore TOSP underscore 48 ball underscore V8. So it's version 8. But the thing that people don't understand is, this official Game Boy cartridge, does everything that we expect it to do. Right? It lets you play the game, and when you turn it off, everything's gone. This one here on the left-hand side has the ROM chip, just like what's under the blob, but because they make these boards so cheap and in such abundant supply, this one that was sold to me as just a simple Tetris game had a RAM chip in it for storing information. So maybe they use this board for Dragon Warrior, Pokemon games, or Zelda, or something with a save. But Tetris doesn't have a save. But I open it up. Sure enough, inside I find this smaller board. Now, just in case you guys are wondering, why is the board smaller? Well, the board is smaller because it can be used in a Game Boy Advance cartridge or in a full-size Game Boy cartridge. Depending on what ROM you put on it is what loads. So we've officially now got a cartridge that came flashed with Tetris that might be usable for things like, a Game Boy Advance game or a Game Boy Color game. And its value, in my mind, is much better than the original Tetris game. Now, what I would do and what I have done with this, and this is the reason why I say that these cheap games might actually be better than the legitimate games, except for if you're a collector, of course, is that if you take this cartridge and you buy a flasher, right, like a device that can plug in here and flash ROMs or read ROMs, there is a very good chance that you can take this and copy onto it a modern version of the game, or, use it and flash, if the chips support it, a Pokemon game. It's got a lot better playing value than Tetris. Or you can go one step further. What I did was I went and searched online to see if there was a way I could take the Tetris ROM and convert it so that instead of just letting you play the game and get high scores until you turn it off, leverage the RAM chip in here and make it so it saves my high scores. So I end up with like a Tetris cartridge like this that keeps high scores for forever, right? Because it's a solid state and it's not battery backed. Like you don't need a battery to keep the memory in the chip. So I could have a high score last 50 years with no problems. So I looked around, and I'm going to tell you the secret. There's a gentleman by the name of Ben Van who had the same idea, and he took the Tetris ROM and he modified it so that it could write the save games to the memory chip. And now when I play this in my Game Boy or my Game Boy Pocket or my Game Boy Color or a Game Boy Advance, it will keep my save games forever. It'll write them to the chip and they're there. Now, maybe the chip will die eventually, but it's after a number of write cycles and not, after a number of years. We'll see, right? Time will tell. A lot better than like the 7 to 8 years you get out of like a Pokemon battery or a Zelda battery. So what would my end game be with something like this? Well, now I've got a Tetris game that had the original Tetris, but it's been modified so you can save the ROM and save your high score. And what would I do next? Well, this case is kind of garbage. Maybe we up it. Maybe instead of putting it in a gray cartridge, we get a black one. We get a black cartridge shell. And this is an aftermarket black cartridge shell because you see the screw hole is higher as opposed to lower. Well, it fits in there. And make sure it clicks into place. But what would I do to really kind of seal the deal to make it better? Well, how about I go ahead and I make a custom sticker? And on this custom sticker, of course, I'm going to give credit to the guy who made it all possible. But because this game is going to be mine, I also took the time and put my logo on it. So, and look, I added the high score saved as opposed to we take a look at the original. Doesn't say anything. Or we look at the cheap knockoff and it says nothing. But here's my sticker, high score saved. So now I've put that back together. I'm going to flip these over. I'm going to put the game bit screw back in here. And as I do with anything, always turn it back a half a turn. That way you're not cross-threading it. If it ever feels tight, don't screw forward. I got my little tri-wing cheapy screw. I'll put it in there. And now I have my aftermarket Tetris game that has been custom branded and is playing a copy of Tetris that will save my high score forever, and it looks super cool. So, in short, why is it better to have a legitimate copy or to have the illegitimate copy over the legitimate copy? Is because you may end up with a circuit board and chips that are worth way more than just the standard ROM. This is great for collecting. This one here, I'm sure if I play my cards right, I can give this game away in 30 years and someone can try and compete against me to get a better high score. What do you think? Comment, and thank you very much for watching.